Well, Suzanne, no? Yes.
And rising. Well, I would like to welcome all of you to the Fresno County Archaeology Society / the San Joaquin chapter of the AIA. AIA brings us speakers that are internationally renowned, such as Mr. Iceman, Mr. Stonehenge, and they also have this wonderful archaeology magazine. And so I like to say that these lectures are always free, but they can be guilt-free if you become a member. And we kind of like to put the social and social archaeology and public archaeology. I've been a president of this wonderful society for as long as I've been associated with Fresno State, which is 35 years, back when dinosaurs were enrolled at Fresno State, I like to say. I'm now retired as of last year. And so this gives me my fix in terms of being here and talking to you. I'll try not to do too much of that, but I'm kind of basking in that right now. I miss teaching. I don't miss grading or all the other stuff. Tonight we are really blessed to have a wonderful lecture by Barlow. And I'll let Sam do the formal introduction. But let me just say that I've had the privilege of being a friend and a floor mate of Barlow. Well, I don't know, I think probably all the years I've been here. There are few of us that are still around that remember those old days. But I think that this is a wonderful opportunity. Like so many societies, we sort of struggle in terms of membership. And we're always looking for ways to increase our visibility. And I think in many ways, this is a wonderful natural pairing. And so I'm really excited about it. I'm also really excited to learn more about Armenian archaeology, something that I have to say I don't know anything about. So I'm going to be really excited for the lecture. We also are having a wonderful visibility opportunity this Saturday at the zoo. I might have some say a few little words about that. And we also advertised our election slate. We'll have an election in May. And so check your newsletter. If anyone just has a burning desire to join the board or become the president or vice president, we're more than happy to consider those things. My poor wife, I think, is the treasurer for a lifetime. It's what happens when you don't come to a board meeting. She got nominated and elected. With no further ado, I will give you Sam. Sam will be our incoming president, and I will be taking his place as the vice president for Twisting Arms and getting people to come and talk. And so, but we'll be in good hands. So.
So good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sam Nunsuk, professor at Fresno State and the vice president for programs for the Fresno County Archaeological Society. Thank you so much, John, our president, for welcoming the audience and the speaker as well. So this Saturday, we have a plan to be at the zoo, the Fresno Chaffee Zoo, for what they call the big event called the Party for the Planet. So it's like related to the Earth Day as well. So if it's not raining, then we are going to be there. We can have our booth. We are going to have our information for about our society. We are going to have some activities like the tour of the kingdoms of Asia. We are going to be in the kingdoms of Asia at the entrance of that exhibit. So you probably have been there already. It's a newest exhibit that we have at the zoo. So related to the kingdoms, the ancient kingdoms that we have from Southeast Asia, actually related to the Khmer or the Cambodian kingdoms over there. So it's going to be a very wonderful opportunity if you guys can make it over there, if it's not raining as well. So before my introduction, please allow me to first share some information about the event's procedure. The talk will be around 50 minutes plus 10 minutes for Q&A. So please keep your questions for the Q&A sessions after the talk that will be conducted by Professor Susana Sosa as well. And please silence your phones. Please double check your phone as well during the talk to be on silent as well. So today is my utmost honor to have a chance to introduce our speaker, Professor Barlow de Mugrdechian. I'm sorry if I pronounced your name wrong. I'm so sorry.
Yes.
Who is a professor and the Barbarian coordinator of the Armenian Studies program at California State University, Fresno. I just learned from Professor Barlow that this year the program will turn 50 as well. Like our society. Our society is turning 50 this year as well. So what a coincidence. Professor Barlow is a proud Fresno State alumnus. He used to be a major in biology and then he changed. I just learned from him as well. And he changed to Armenian studies major after he took an art history class, actually. So it's a wonderful story as well. And he has his training, he has his graduate training at UCLA. So he's a Californian person. Professor Barlow teaches courses in and has numerous publications on Armenian history, language, art, literature, and culture, a broad varieties of subjects. He is the general editor of the Armenian series of the press at California State University, Fresno as well. He was the chairman of the Armenian Community Council of the San Joaquin Valley and currently serves as the president of the Society for Armenian Studies. For us today, he is going to give a talk entitled Armenia, Discovering the Prehistory of an Ancient Land. I try to remove this tab. So let me see if I can remove this. Okay. So in archaeology, scholars have long recognized the significance of the region that Armenia is situated between the Caspian Sea and the Black Sea as a crossroads and as the hub of civilizations in the Trans-Asiatic trade network since the prehistoric period. So in this context, we are going to learn a lot about this land. We are very fortunate to have him here with us tonight. Please join me in welcoming Professor Barlow.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank Professor Pryor for the introduction and also the invitation, and Professor Nunsuk. Thank you to the Fresno County Archaeological Society and the art history program at Fresno State, the School of Art History. It's a great honor to be able to be here today to share with you some of the art history and the prehistory of the place called Armenia. So today I'm going to give you an overview of some of Armenian history from roughly at least 5,000 years before the time of Christ, all the way up to the first century of this millennium. And in doing so, we'll take a look at various eras of Armenian history. At the end, I'll be happy to take questions with you. So let's take a look at the geography of the area that we're going to be looking at. As we look at a map of the area, you see an area that I've circled in red. That is the area that I'll be focusing on. So everything that I'm going to be looking at is in that area, although there are no real borders. That's not a real border in the sense of any kind of fence or any kind of thing. This is an area which historically has been the crossroads between Europe and Asia, and we would consider this to be an area of Southwest Asia. And we're going to see that it's the home to later Armenian kingdoms that we'll be talking about. but also, again, the early art history of the Armenians. We can also call this area the Armenian Highlands because the area is basically a high plateau. I'm talking about this area, which is roughly 4,000 to 8,000 feet. As you move from west to east, the land is lowlands here, more or less, but then as you move upwards to the east, it begins to rise and becomes a very mountainous area. So we'll see a lot of mountains in the areas that we're going to be covering. Later on, by the time we get to the 9th century BC, we can identify the beginning of Armenian kingdoms. So on this map, I've just shown you, it says Kingdom of Armenia. That's kind of a generic because there are various dynasties of Armenian kingdoms. And we'll see one actually in the 9th century, and then we'll see another one in the 1st century. And then even today in 2026, one very small part of this, maybe a tenth of the historic area, is still constituting a modern country of Armenia, which was established in 1991. So we're looking at a place that has a continuous history over probably 6,000 or 7,000 years of the area that we're going to be looking at. So we're going to start out with one of the most interesting archaeological discoveries which took place in Armenia. And the name of the place we're going to go to is a place called Karahunj. That name should sound familiar, Stonehenge, Karahunj. But actually, this site is much older than Stonehenge. In Armenian, it's called Zorats Karer. Kar in Armenian means stone. Zorats, kind of strong stones. It's in a region of Armenia. So this is a map of today's Armenia, this meaning the area that's in pink. The capital of the modern Republic of Armenia is called Yerevan. And from Yerevan, if you were to drive about 2 hours south into this area, is when you would come to this place called Zorats Karer. And recent scholarship on this area places the date roughly around 4,500 years before the time of Christ. So it's roughly 6,500 years, could be even a little bit older. It's a megalithic structure, as we'll see. So this is an aerial view of the site. And as you can see from the aerial view, you can see some placing of stones. And then also the remnants of a circular area of this site. These are photos that I've taken. It's a place that I visit often when I go to Armenia. I like to take students here because it really does show the ancient nature of Armenia. And so you can see that this is the way it is today. And you can see that there are these stones which are placed in this area. Yeah. Okay, thank you. So the stones that are placed in this semicircular area. In the background are high mountains. So this is actually at an elevation of approximately 5,000 feet. And then around it would be high mountains, 6,000, 7,000, 8,000 feet high. Now let's move closer. And as you move closer, we begin to see some of the nature of the stone. The natural stone, the most abundant natural stone in Armenia is a volcanic stone called tufa. Volcanic because the area is a volcanic hot zone, you might call it, seismic zone, much like California. No volcano has erupted in modern history, but the ancient volcanoes produced a rock which we call tufa stone. Generally speaking, it's this reddish color. It's a light physically, but when it hardens, it's very strong, and it becomes the building block of most of Armenian architecture, and most of the prehistory that we'll be looking at will be composed of this. So what is this place? So we think of Stonehenge and we think of Karahunj. And this again begins to kind of illustrate it. You begin to see these stones with these holes. And here's a really good example of it. So the recent scholarship suggests that it was an ancient observatory, that it was used to track the movement of the stars and suns, just as we've had at other places throughout the world where humans are very much interested in, looking up at the universe in those days. You can imagine the sky filled with stars, and then observing that they move, and then observing that on certain days, oh, this is the shortest day of the year, this is the longest day of the year. This is what we believe that this site is. We don't have any written evidence for anything here, but it's all based on the research that's been done here by Armenian scholars in the last 30 or 40 years. And then today it's a national park, so people can visit it. Actually, there wasn't much there the last time I visited. Basically, there's a trailer, which is kind of the headquarters, and you can kind of buy some books. There's some actually really nice publications, which are very scientifically done, which discuss this site. So we believe this is one of the oldest, if not the oldest, Armenian prehistorical site at a place called Karahunj. The name Hunj, Henge, in Armenian Hunj is the sound that air makes as it goes through these holes. So that's the sound, and we think that that's the name Kar, stone, and then the sound that it makes, Hunj. Now, any other further kind of, ideas, well, how are they related? I can't answer to you, but certainly there's some relationship between these types of sites throughout the world. David Marshall Lang was a scholar, British scholar, who in 1970 wrote a book. He called it Armenia, Cradle of Civilization. And in that book, he outlined much of the early prehistory of the Armenians. So I want to start also, again, by just kind of giving you several maps of Armenia. Once again, that general area that we've covered. This is a map which would be from the 2nd century BC. And you see here the Roman Empire. Down in the southeast is the Parthian Empire, which is the precursor, followed the Achaemenid Empire, then there was the Parthian Empire, then there was the Sassanid Persian Empire. So Armenians and the Persians have a long history of cultural and religious interaction. And as I said, that Armenia is a crossroads because it's really the easternmost edge of what we call Europe. And if you look at the Roman world, that's pretty much as far as the Roman world ever got. At one time, Armenia was briefly conquered by the Romans in the period of the 1st century BC. You've heard maybe of generals Lucullus or Pompey. They conquered Armenia for a brief period. It became part of the Roman Empire, but then it was too far for the Romans to keep. It was too much trouble, so they retreated from that area. So the one thing I want to mention again about the idea of why is Armenia such an ancient area is through two types of research that's also been done. One is on the research on metallurgy. What areas of the world did early humans begin to figure out how to produce metal from ore? Things like iron, copper, tin, gold, etc. Well, if we look at this area, this is the area we are calling Armenia. We can see it's the darker area, and each of those dots represents an area of metallurgy. Scientists have discovered multiple areas within the greater Armenia area in which there's great evidence for the earliest examples of metallurgy, where the human beings mastered how to cast bronze, combination of tin and copper, how to eventually work with iron and steel. And it's basically in Armenia, it starts, and I believe that from there it traveled to other places. So metallurgy is one important area. Why in Armenia also? Because it's mountainous and there's a lot of ore there, right? So today even it's a rich area of rare earths, minerals, gold, silver, and there's still a lot of mining in modern Armenia. The other area is in the diffusion of agriculture. Because the discovery of agriculture, that is, when I say the discovery, when human beings began to raise crops rather than to go out and simply hunt and gather, this was one of the great revolutions in early history. And there is a lot of evidence for very early crops in Armenia, things like barley and wheat. And there are actually scientists who studied it, and I've been to this area where they have the ancient strains of wheat and all of the other kinds of things that were being grown here. So we believe that the agricultural revolution also began in this area, which just indicates the ancient nature of this region. For those of you that would like to really study more about it, there is a wonderful museum in Armenia, which is called the History Museum of Armenia. It used to be called the State History Museum. It was established in the Soviet era when Armenia was part of the Soviet Union. But it has it's a three-story area, three-story building in the center of Yerevan. And on each floor, it kind of takes you through a walk through the prehistory of Armenia all the way up to more modern times. So I put here the site for it, but you just look up History Museum of Armenia, and many of the things that I'll be talking about, you could look at more examples because we don't have time to put everything into it. There are actually many interesting museums in Armenia, the Republic of Armenia. There's an ethnographic museum, which also traces the history of Armenians back to the earliest human settlements. So I'm going to be talking about various cultures which have been studied and discovered in the area of Armenia. The first that I'm going to start with is a culture which is called the Kura-Araxes culture. It refers to two rivers. I'll show you those in the next slide. The Kura River is the northern boundary between Armenia and the modern country of Georgia. The Araxes River is the river which is the border between Armenia and Persia. And those two rivers both meet and exit into the Caspian Sea, empty into the Caspian Sea. So the area between them is called the Kura-Araxes area. And this discovery of various artifacts, including this burial cart, which is from 4000 to 2000 BCE. So early prehistory of Armenia in this area was this culture. Here's the area. So this is the Kura River. Tbilisi is the modern capital of the country of Georgia. Some of you know it as Tiflis. And then for Armenia, the Araxes is called the Mother River because most of the oldest archaeological sites and even the modern city of Yerevan are all sited along that river. Water is, of course, necessary for any settlements in life. And so you can see that they join and then empty into the Caspian Sea. Each of these represents an area which has been excavated either during Soviet times or in the past 30 years during the Republic of Armenia. And this is where they've discovered artifacts and have identified this as a unique culture in this period. And then you see the beautiful artwork in their pottery and the symbolism, which again repeats in other cultures that are also in this area because they borrow from each other. Now, if you're in Armenia, again, Yerevan, it seems like the southern area is an area which is really interesting. We're going to move to a very new discover area, which is again about an hour and a half south of Yerevan. And it's called the area of Areni, A-R-E-N-I, Areni. Areni refers to a region. It's actually also the name of a variety of grapes. So the Areni variety of grapes is one of the oldest varieties of grapes. And the interesting part in this area is that we're going to be looking at Armenian caves, human civilization as it existed in caves. And so what you're looking at here is you park and then you can walk. And then as you walk, you'll see we're going to go up some stairs and then you actually go inside the mountain. And here's where archaeologists have discovered just in the past few years, because it was only in 2007 to 10, that archaeologists discovered this area and came up with some really fascinating things that we're going to look at. So the world's oldest winery. So you walk up here, it's just a nice walk up, and then you get into the area, which has now been divided up into areas. But this is one area, which we're going to look at something which isn't dealing with the winery, but something which is very different as well. And you can kind of see it over here. So an archaeologist was doing work in this area and they discovered something intact, which really shocked everybody. It's considered to be the world's oldest leather shoe. So they found a completely intact, preserved leather shoe. And if you look at that shoe, you can see the laces, and it was stuffed with straw, and then it was in an area which had kept it free kind of from any other contact, too much air. So it stayed intact, and it's believed to be from 3,500 years old, so almost 5,500 years old. An indication that the early civilizations that lived here, a civilization that lived in these caves, was already producing these type of materials, a leather shoe. And in this slide, this is how the shoe acts. So this was found right in this place. And for a while, it was kept in a local museum in this area, but then it was transferred to the museum I was just talking to you about. And so I wanted to show it what it looks like today and how it's displayed to kind of give you an idea also of the size of the shoe. You can see people behind it, but this is how it's displayed. But you can see that the lacing and again, looks like a sport shoe, right? Almost like a sport shoe today, but considered to be the world's oldest intact shoe found in Armenia. In those same caves, were also discovered vats of wine and remnants of grapes, grape culture. And viticulture is an area which Armenia has a long history. As long as Armenians, we talk about Armenian history and even into prehistory, we talk about the viticulture of Armenia. I mentioned to you the Adeni sort or variety is a red wine. So how do you date these wines? It's something I discovered when I was looking at this. There's something which is called malvidin, which is actually the dye which gives grapes their color. And so you can use that as a dating technique. And so in the Journal of Archaeological Science, they found the remnants of the wine seeds, right? Because they've crushed the wine and they found the remnants and those dyes, and they've been able to date it back 4,000 years, 6,000 years. So perhaps the oldest discovered winery in the world, which is in Armenia today. An entire region around this area is a wonderful wine region, and they have wineries, and it's like wine culture is really growing in Armenia. It wasn't really so big maybe 40, 50 years ago. There was cognac, which is a form, but today wine culture is really growing, and so it kind of makes sense that it started maybe in this area 4,000, 6,000 years ago. World's oldest shoe, leather shoe, and then also the world's oldest winery producing wine, which is, something which is, again, if you look at it from the biblical perspective, the first slide I showed you a mountain. That's Mount Ararat. And according to the book of Genesis, when Noah landed on the mountain and then they raised wine, he became drunk. It's the place where it begins, according to the Bible at least. And this is also added kind of evidence. Then we move to another area of Armenia, which is called Medzamor culture. And actually, most of the cultures that I'm talking about were all developed along rivers. So we had Kura-Arax culture. Now we have Medzamor culture, which is very interesting because today the Medzamor River is where Armenia's one nuclear plant is located. There's one nuclear plant built in the Soviet days. It's built along a river because it needs cooling, and it's in the area called Medzamor. But in this region is also a very old culture, and on the left you can see a settlement. We believe that it was no more than 30 to 50,000 people at its peak, the Medzamor culture, which was Bronze Iron Age, maybe 5,000 BCE, all the way up until the 17th century. So the archaeologists have discovered a lot of artifacts. Again, you can find a lot more of these as you go along and if you go into the museums. But on the right is one, it's a very interesting one. This is actually a religious ritual clay pot. So this was something to do with the religious values, religious beliefs of this settlement in terms of how they worshipped. So this was a central part of their worship. It's a very interesting pot, as you see. And then there's these, raised hills, which are the areas where the settlements are. And we see this later in Armenian history as well, because when we get to Urartu, it's always on the raised hills, as you're going to see in just a moment. This is common probably in most areas of the world. But again, it's just indicating to you, this is to the north of Yerevan. So the other ones were south of Yerevan, meaning that this entire region was inhabited from a very early period. Now, this is one of my favorite ones because it's one that very few people know about. So in the Medzamor area, there is actually a museum called the Medzamor Museum. It's also online. You can also open it up and look at things. But they discovered in this area these single stelae. This is composed probably of basalt, which is another volcanic stone. But there's something very important about it because it is carved and inscribed with the image of a dragon. In Armenian, they are called Vishap Akar. That's a compound word. Vishap means dragon. Kar means stone. So we call these Vishap Akar. Vishap Akar. What are they? They're a single piece of stone And then they're inscribed, which we'll see a little closer in just a moment, but they're associated with water and cults of water. And there have been about 120 of these discovered throughout Armenia. And this is another one, but it's going to show you better this face. Now, I say dragon, you think, I don't know, you think of a modern movie of a dragon. I don't know what you think of a dragon, but dragons are not that what we think of today. In Armenian culture, they have multiple meanings. Actually, the earliest meaning is associated with the cults of water. So as you see here, it says they were erected in water-rich locations, near springs, irrigation channels, marshy meadows, and burial mounds. And this suggests that they were originally connected to the cult of water, protecting. So they're totems of protection. And they were actually erected in very high locations, like 7,000, 8,000 feet. And some people have suggested that there's a network of these, which it's like the whole water system was connected with these vishapakars, which represent then also a protection against anything against it. Without water, you can't live. So it's protecting irrigation systems and also agricultural fertility, because Armenia depends a lot on well, any agriculture depends on water, but Armenians were also among the earliest peoples to develop canal systems to channel water from the high mountains down into the agricultural areas. So the Vishap symbolism is closely tied to life-giving force and abundance. This one was placed in front of what's called the Armenian Ethnographic Museum. It's just in its front porch area, but it really gives you an idea. They're usually up one single stone and carved only on one side. So it's only carved on this side. And they've been discovered in various areas and regions. And recently there's been a lot of research done on these and books written on them, explaining their symbolism and their importance in Armenian culture. So the Vishapakar is a very uniquely Armenian contribution to world art, but also to the idea of what people were thinking about, how they saw themselves in the world, and they saw themselves that they had to protect the water, and they used these vishaps. Later, that same dragon motif is found in Armenian carpet making. So there are styles of Armenian carpets called dragon style. So the word dragon keeps repeating. Later, there's a myth about dragons who are actually killed by Armenian gods. The dragons then had a more negative connotation. But you see, it's still common throughout the history of this period. Then we're going to move to another culture, which is called in Armenian Mugrdechian. Muj is Lij. Lij in Armenian means lake. So it's the lake culture. Again, water, lake culture. Let me just show you. The largest and only freshwater lake in Armenia today is Lake Sevan. It's a very large lake. It's a freshwater lake. But over time, especially in the last 50 or 60 years in the Soviet period, the Soviets began to drain the water for electricity and also for drinking water. But they were draining it faster than the inflow, which means that the level is dropping. It still is dropping. And so this used to be an island. This was an island. This was all underwater. On this island up here, you can't see it very well, are two 9th century Armenian churches. But the reason I'm showing it to you is because as the water level then began to lower, what do you find? You find the evidence of the earlier cultures because they had been submerged. And that's the Mugrdechian culture. So in the Mugrdechian culture, again, circa 1300, and this may overlap with some of the earlier cultures that we talked about. It's a wagon, considered a marvel of ancient engineering. It's almost 6 feet in length and constructed primarily of oak with bronze fittings that highlight again the metallurgical skills that we talked about. And its frame is composed of sturdy wooden beams, intricately, yeah. Let's see if we might show it. I pressed something wrong. Yeah.
It's okay. It's okay.
Yeah. Perfect. Thank you. So this culture, then the Mugrdechian culture, was discovered along the lakes of Lake Sevan, which means that, again, people were living here obviously 3,000 years ago because there was an abundant source of water. And then again, the cultural artifacts which can be found in this area. So multiple location of civilizations that lived in the area of Armenia. Now, the final two areas we'll look at are very interesting ones. So now we move to the 9th century BC. And this is a culture that we have a lot of information about. It's called the Kingdom of Ararat. And in Semitic languages, which would be languages like Assyrian, Hebrew, Arabic, but really here Assyrian, Ararat is Urartu. It's the same word. So etymologically, Urartu and Ararat are the same because it's the consonants that are important. So in Semitic languages, you don't include the vowels. So if you look at the RRT order, you pronounce the way you want to, you add the vowels that you want to. So Ararat is Mount Ararat, but it's also called sometimes the Kingdom of Urartu, and it's considered to be the earliest identifiable Armenian kingdom. Everything we've seen before, we can say is Armenian because it's located in Armenia, but as far as the people, we're not so sure that we can call them Armenian. I would call them Armenian, but in this case, this is a culture which lasted from the 9th century to the 6th century. It's again, geographically, right on the same area we've been talking about, covering those same areas we've been talking about. Remember Lake Sevan we just looked at? It's within the area. The modern city of Yerevan is right here. And then you can kind of see this over here. What's interesting about this map, which is based on Assyrian sources and also the sources of Urartian, because they have their own language we're going to see, their own alphabet or system of writing. So in non-Armenian languages, meaning in, let's say, any other language except Armenian, people are called Armenians, right? We say they're Armenians, but Armenians don't refer to themselves as Armenians. But the question is, where did we get the word Armenian from? Well, there was a tribe called the Armeshupria who lived in this area. And by the 6th century BC, all Greek sources and all Persian sources uniformly named this area as Armenia. So they're using the Western and also Persian sources, all because they're Indo-European, all say Armenia. But an ancient source, more ancient one is this one, Hayasa, which is what Armenians call themselves in the Armenian language. Hayastan is land of the Armenians. And in Armenian, Hay is an Armenian person. And so this also comes from this historical reference by the Assyrians to this area. So this is the culture of the Kingdom of Urartu or Ararat. This is their writing system. So this is cuneiform. Cuneiform, which we have abundant cuneiform tablets from this period. The language has been deciphered, so it can be read. Scientists can read this. And in one such that we're going to see, the king of Urartu said, I, the king of Urartu Argishti, built this fortress in the year 782 BC. Now, he's not using our calendar, but that's what you can figure out from knowing about it. So cuneiform is this inscriptions, and there are fortresses of the Urartians, which are found throughout the area which I have on the map. Now, today, this is modern Turkey, and this place called Tushpa is the modern place called Van, which actually is the place where my grandparents came from, which was historically an Armenian area, but in this period was the capital. And there was a fortress there, which has been excavated and looked at. And then we're going to go over here to the outskirts to Yerebuni in just a moment, which is a fortress which was guarding the outskirts of the kingdom. Why did they need defensive fortifications? Because their greatest enemy was Assyria. And for 300 years, Assyrians and Urartians fought each other. Urartu was up in the mountains. Assyria was down on the lowlands. That's modern Iraq, northern Iraq. So they would be fighting each other. And the Assyrians had in their annals, in their writing about this kingdom, and then the Armenians, that is the Urartians, had it in their cuneiform writing. So it's really interesting historical work. So here's the one fortress we're going to be looking at. So we're actually looking at an aerial view. This is actually a hill, which you can kind of see because this is modern development. Modern meaning 40s, 50s, 60s homes. This is right in the middle of the heart of the city of Yerevan, the capital of modern Armenia. So it's imagine you're in the middle of a modern city, and right in the middle of it is a 9th century site, which is dated to the year 782 BC, which is today what Armenia, the city of Yerevan, celebrates as its birthday. So makes it one of the oldest cities in the world. So 2026 plus 782, you can do the math. It's 2,800, which puts it right up there with Damascus, Rome, old cities of the world. This was actually a fortress. So once again, you see here an ancient wall. And then you see precincts that I'll talk about. And then today you can walk into this area. And then at the base of this hill is a museum, another museum, which is dedicated, as I'll show you, to this kingdom. Now, you're all archaeologists, you know what's happening. You're digging, right? So this was completely covered by earth. And then archaeologists, back up for 1 second. I always find this very interesting. This kingdom came to a sudden end in the 6th century. It's as if it fell off the end of the edge of the world, completely disappearing. It doesn't appear in any classical source, any classical Greek source. This kingdom disappeared. And then it was rediscovered in the Soviet period, and archaeologists began to uncover it and discovered this fantastic culture called the Kingdom of Urartu. So this is what it looks like kind of today, but this is a reconstruction. So this was actually a military outpost. There's one area which was the area where the king lived. There was an area where the soldiers lived, and then there was an area which was the religious precinct, the temple area. And the gods and goddesses of the kingdom of Urartu were gods and goddesses, of course, is way pre-Christian. They had their own pantheon of gods and goddesses. So we're going to go into this area. And this is what it looks like today. So you can walk around it. And now they've uncovered certain areas. And even though I said the kingdom of Urartu was lost in history, it was not abandoned. Because there are various layers of cultures coming after it. Persian culture, later other cultures. So it shows that the area was inhabited, but the historical memory was lost. Now, walking in here, we come to this area right here. So this is a partially reconstructed temple called the Temple of Yerepuni. So when you walk inside here, would have been the area where the idols would have been erected, where they would have been worshiping. And what's interesting about this site is its continuity in Armenian architecture, because I mentioned to you earlier about the usage of stone, and that Armenians in their construction typically use tufa stone. So the material that you see here is Armenian tufa stone. But here now it's been cut into square blocks and then assembled. And this becomes actually the technique which later will become very prevalent in Armenian church building. So once Armenians become Christian in the 4th century AD, then all the Armenian churches begin to utilize the same construction techniques as was used in the temple of Yerepuni. By the way, the name Yerepuni, if I put it, so you see here the name Yerebuni, it's the basis for the modern city of Yerevan. Yerebuni, Yerevan, B became V. The B in ancient Urartian became V in modern Armenian. So that's actually the place where the city around it now is a city of 1 million people. So modern metropolitan, but right in the middle of it is this historic site, prehistoric site that you can visit. And then again, the slab, which has cuneiform, which has been deciphered by scientists, which says simply that I, the king, Argishti, that's his name, I built this temple in honor of his god Teishibani, and he built it in the year 782 BC. So that's where we date Yerepuni and the city of Yerevan from that. you can see that it's built up, right? I mean, we're looking out over here. Actually, there's line of sight to other of these hills, which were all outposts of the Urartians. So they had these elevated sites, which were all the fortresses. Therefore, it was a defensive network because they were constantly being attacked by the Assyrians. Now let's look at some of the art produced. And again, this ties in with my earlier discussion about metallurgy. Have any of you heard of the word rhyton before that haven't taken my class? Have you heard of a rhyton before? Rhytons are, well, what does it look like? I'll open it up to you. What does it look like? What does this object look like? Anybody can.
Drinking cup?
Yeah.
Like a horn.
Yeah, like a horn, right? Drinking cup. So a wide brim. And then down here. So this is a ceremonial drinking vessel, which was used probably by the Greeks and also by the Assyrians. So it's kind of in that Asia Minor area. This is made completely out of silver. This is silver work. It's hollow. So what would have been done probably is filled with wine, and then when groups of people would have visited, they would drink these ceremonially, like peace. You know, they're making peace with each other. But we look at the design and the intricacy. Look at the man sitting on the horse. This is a horse. We can tell so much from just this one work of art, and there's many of these rhytons which have been uncovered. The way that he looks. This is presumably a noble person of Urartu. He looks very much also like an Assyrian with his beard. He also has a ceremonial dagger. He's seated on the horse, but not on a saddle, but on a piece of textile, a carpet, which carpet making is part of Armenian historical history from prehistory. I was mentioning to the professor that the world's oldest carpet fragment is the Pasrik carpet, which is 2,500 years old. It's the earliest intact carpet fragment, and it's made by Armenians. So here also we see all of that, a beautiful rhyton drinking vessel. Obviously, there were lots of pottery which was discovered. A lot of it has friezes on it, so there's usually hunting scenes. They used a glazing technique, so they were highly accomplished in producing pottery. Which was later exported when Armenia became another kingdom. It was actually exported all over the world, to Europe, to other places. Armenian pottery was being exported because it was such high quality and such beautiful colors. And then we talked about bronze. There's another Armenian fortress. So we had Yerepuni, another place called the Red Hill, Garmir Palur, Red Fortress, Red Hill. And you can see here the sheath of a sword, but it's made out of bronze. So they use bronze implements. And you can see that they like the chariots, right? Just like the Assyrians. And then here is a bronze helmet, which is dating also from this period of this kingdom. So they also were already in the 9th century very adept at creating objects out of metal, the metallurgy. And there's jewelry, there's lots of jewelry, lots of other metalwork, weapons, shields, all kinds of beautiful objects from this period, and they have been preserved. And the agricultural part too, because they used to use larger ones of these jars as containers for wine, oil, meat, because it's wintertime is really very difficult. You have to prepare your food and then store it because you can only eat the stored food. You can't go out and hunt. So there would be a lot of these as well, including wine vats, which they have the evidence because the wine seed remained. And then the final area that I'm going to show you tonight, and then we'll open up for questions, is that when we get to the period of the 2nd century BC, so we went 9th to 6th century, and now we're jumping ahead 400 years to the 2nd century. We come to the period which is called the Artaxerxean dynasty. It's the name of an Armenian kingdom. This is the kingdom which came into contact with the Romans. So it's the period when Armenia achieved its greatest kingdom under a king called King Tigran the Great. I'm not going to go into that tonight, but just to show you that this was kind of the peak of Armenia's empire. Armenia was an empire. Actually, it extended all the way from the Mediterranean, the Holy Lands, Palestine, all the way to the Caspian and Black Sea. So it was a huge empire, but very brief, only about 40 years. Then going forward to the 1st century, 66 AD, there's a new Armenian dynasty, which very interestingly was not originally Armenian, it was Parthian, Persian. And the first king of this dynasty was the younger brother of the great king of Persia, who put his brother on this very important throne. And later, the Persians actually just stayed in Armenia and then became Armenianized, and then we call it this Armenian dynasty. Okay, so now we're going to look at the last bit of the prehistory will be from the Arshakuni dynasty. Once again, the map of Armenia. And again, you could see here, this is Arax River, and these are all ancient capitals of Armenia because they're all along the river here. Well, this isn't Armenia, right? This is the Parthenon. So this is the Parthenon, but I'm going to show it to you because of a comparison that we're going to make in just a moment. So this was the golden age of Greek art and architecture, the Parthenon, built on the Acropolis, roughly circa 450 BCE, with all the classic Greek style architectural elements. I'm not going to go into the details, but keep this in mind because we're going to see something that's very Armenian. So today we're going to end with the Temple of Garni. Garni is a location, but at Garni, an Armenian temple was built, which we're going to see, and it was built in the 1st century, and it's Greco-Roman style. So this is considered Greek style. Later, the Romans adopted many Greek architectural styles, and we call it today Greco-Roman style. So Temple of Garni. But the first thing we're going to start with is this, that this temple, which was built almost 2,000 years ago, was completely destroyed by an earthquake in 1679. And from 1679 until roughly 1970, this is what you would have seen. It just completely razed almost this temple down to the ground. And this is an interesting black and white. This is the temple back here. You see a person here. These are actually the baths of Garni, because the king had built his own baths, which were decorated with mosaics, which are in itself another area of art that we could study, but we're not going to do it tonight. And then later, there actually was an Armenian church built next to the temple. All of it was destroyed. This was a massive earthquake. Armenia is a massive earthquake zone. Many monuments have been destroyed over the centuries by massive earthquakes. 7.0. 1988, there was a massive earthquake in the northern part of Armenia. It was a 6.9 in Gyumri, and it killed 50,000 people, left more than 100,000 homeless. And still today, there are people who are suffering from that 1988 earthquake. That was in modern times. But look at this, is 1679. And then the Armenian government, the Soviet Armenian government, said, we're going to rebuild this monument. And so now, today, it looks like this. So this is the rebuilt Temple of Garni as it looks today. The rebuilt Temple of Garni as it looks today. Partially reconstructed, but then completely renovated. What's really interesting about this was that very first king, remember I told you about the Parthian king, Tiridates, or I didn't give you his name, Tiridates. The Armenians, the Romans and the Persians were fighting over Armenia. Armenia was a strategically important region, so they were at war with each other. They finally came to an agreement. The agreement was that the Persians could place their candidate for the throne on the throne, and then the Romans would have the right to agree or disagree. Doesn't always work, right? You could already figure out that's going to lead to some problems. But the first king, Tiridates, who's perfectly Parthian, but he's the king of Armenia, wanted to have his kingdom then recognized by a power greater than him, which would be the emperor of Rome. And who was the emperor? Nero. Nero was the emperor of Rome in 66 AD. And so in a story which is recounted in Armenian historical works, Tiridates traveled all the way from Armenia to Rome. And there he bowed down at the feet of Nero, who placed the crown of Armenia on his head in front of the great crowds in the Roman theater in the Roman area. It was like a big holiday, like Nero is getting the, the subject, the Armenian Parthian king. And much of that is recorded that the Armenians were Zoroastrian in this period. So they took with them magi, Zoroastrian magi, and actually they believe that Nero was initiated into the Zoroastrian religion because he was curious. The women had to cover their faces with golden masks because women could not expose their face. Zoroastrians could not travel over water, so they had to go over land. They couldn't take boats because water was polluting. So in this temple then is an area when you go up the stairs, which is an area which has the area for the icons, which would be the gods that they worshipped at this time. So does that not look pretty much in the style of the Parthenon? So it's actually Roman artisans who were brought from Rome then in. So he went to Rome, and then what did Nero say? Okay, I'm going to help you build something. This was a summer religious retreat for the king. Summer religious retreat for the king. Next to it is a palace, and it's a very cool area because summers can be hot in Armenia. So that's why it's here. And I want to show you some of the architectural parts. This up here is an acanthus leaf decoration, which is used in Greek art often as a sign of or symbol of eternal life. So borrowed from the Greek art as well. Elements of the destroyed temple were incorporated with modern materials. So you can see here, these lighter gray, that's cast concrete, modern. The other parts were the elements which they found and were able to reassemble, right? So this would be the ancient original stone. Along the top is a typical Greek frieze, meaning decorations, carvings, all different types of decoration, very much done in the Greek style. So this today is the only Greek Roman style temple left standing in Armenia, and really all of the old Soviet Union. Why is that? Because when Armenians became Christian, they destroyed most of the old temples and built churches on top of the old temples. But this one somehow survived, and today is considered to be a monument of Armenian architecture. Thank you very much. I'll open it up for questions if you have any questions for me today. Do you have any questions or? Yes, we have one here and then we'll go over here.
So I love the dragon stones.
Mm-hmm.
There are interesting parallels to California in which there are these sacred stones that are always associated with water.
Mm-hmm.
The direction that they face is often really important. So it would be interesting to look at, and we were saying that there was certainly a directionality. That would be an interesting study.
I think so.
Are they facing away from the water or towards the water?
Mm-hmm. I don't have those details, but there are literally been books recently done in English. They originally were in Armenian, translated, which probably address that. Yeah, yeah, very much so. One over here, and then we'll come back over here.
Culture for the wagon. You said it was approved what's it called again? Marvel of ancient engineering. I wanted to know why. What exactly made it a marvel?
Yeah, well, first of all, just the development of circular wheels, so that makes it easier to move. That's just creating ways to make your work easier, right? So people created and developed things like wagons. And just the engineering of it, meaning that you have to put it all together in a way that's going to last, right? And so there's metal fittings actually. So somebody thought, okay, the parts that are going to be used, metal may last longer than wood, and the way that they did that, yeah, I think that's what we're looking at.
Back when you were talking about the oldest city, the one that dated back to 782,
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything like protecting it, like any walls around it?
Okay, so this is pretty much all the way it looks today. It is open actually. So you can do two ways of accessing it. One, you can climb a set of stairs. So you have to buy a ticket if you're gonna go there. It's a place you visit, like a national park. Or you can actually take a road from the back that actually from a car you can just go there. But it's really not protected too much. I think there may be one guard there. This could be a problem, but it hasn't been a problem that I'm aware of. But this is all that's there. So there's nothing else protecting it in that sense. Like it has really pretty much open access. So actually you can walk along here, that's on top of the wall. So you can actually walk pretty much around the whole precinct on top of the walls. And then they've done actually some excavations down here along the sides, actually, and they've discovered other things as well. So, yeah.
So before the excavation in the Soviet era, did they have any belief of the sacredness of the site? Because there was a temple up there too, right? Was
So-
there any evidence of that?
I don't think so, because all of this is new because the city is expanding. And, unfortunately, we know what happens when cities expand. They just take over whatever is there. It could be a cemetery, it could be some other things, right? My point is that I don't believe that it was identified until it was identified by archaeologists looking at some records. Then they came and began to say, okay, this is something that's important. But it wasn't any worship there because it was forgotten.
So it
Yeah.
was not like a pilgrimage site. There was no church or anything.
No, because this is way before Christianity and the whole culture had been lost. So somehow Armenian Soviet scientists were able to go back into the history, into Assyrian records, and then figure it out that, oh, there is something here. All of this here is 40s and 50s later. So you have to just picture this as just open land, because this is on the outskirts of today a large city, 1 million people.
I have one more
Yeah.
question about the dragon. So the dragon looks like a snake, right? A serpent.
Well, it's an interesting question. It kind of just has these big eyes and this kind of area here, and then that's what it looks like. Now, don't know what that looks like. They're calling it a dragon, but that's what the Armenians call it.
Not from that period, but the new word for that, right?
Yeah.
Not from 4000 BCE.
Well, that's coming from at least, if we're calling it that, we're calling it Vishapakar because as far back as we can go, and the reference was that's the word that comes up, right? So we don't have anything written from 4,000 years old.
I see.
Like there's nothing written on this, but there was some historical memory, right, passed on orally until it was recorded.
And the form of this Visha
Uh-huh.
would be like this with the arms, with
Yeah.
the legs.
Well,
So-
just erect like this, nothing extending out. Nothing extending out. These are actually phallic symbols, but they're not in the sexual way that we think of it. They're actually more of, again, agricultural production, fertility. But there's a lot of these in Armenia too.
I see.
Yeah.
So if
Yeah. No, it's okay.
So if the Armenian person watch the modern TV series like the House of the Dragons, for
Mhm.
example, Games of Thrones, are they going to call the dragon Visha?
The word is Vishap in Armenian. Yes. Dragon is
Oh.
Vishap. Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah. Ron or Linda, doesn't matter.
He's gonna defer to me first. Okay, so I am so curious about the Armenian Stonehenge because, especially because we just had, the, equinox, right? And so in the one in the UK, there was always those pictures with the sunrise or the moon or all that kind of stuff. So and you said observatory, but are they in progress? Are they able to determine that the stones have been placed in such a way that on those solstices, on the equinox, that the sun, the moon are hitting certain?
That is the theory, and some have suggested it and tried to prove it. Some disagree with that, I think, but I think I'm willing to go along with it. It sounds logical. I think some of them may have been moved, in the course of time, so we don't have all of them in the perfect circle that we may have had it before. But certainly it has that element to it. Why else were these stones? So they must have just come every day and looked, and they say, oh, it's moving, and then today's like this. It's like years, like the Greeks did it, right? Like just years and years of observation and just putting it together. It's amazing. Anastasia, yeah.
We have mountain peaks around.
Yes,
That's
big.
perfect kind of.
And in those mountain areas, actually, they found very old petroglyphs. So there's a lot of other material in those mountains. Armenia is very mountainous. Anastasia, and then we'll come back to Ron.
Armenian civilization when the water receded from Lake Sevan,
Mhm.
but you also mentioned Lake Van, and wasn't there a civilization or like a city found underneath Lake Van quite recently as well?
Not familiar with that. Let's go back. Let's see. So Lake Van actually has islands. This is kind of maybe off the subject, but it has islands, one of which has an Armenian church dating from the 10th century. And it is considered to be one of the most beautiful Armenian churches. So during Christian times. I'm not really familiar. I think I may have read about it, but yeah, there's certainly going to be something other than just what's on the shoreline, because this is an ancient culture.
It's covered with water, and that's basically the area some debate that it was, even though it's a legend, but.
Well, there's a legend, but I think the legend is more related. So there was a legend that there's an island. It's called Akhtamar. On the island lived a beautiful young woman, and on the shoreline was her boyfriend. So every night she would light a fire and he would swim to her. Her parents found her out. This is kind of one variation. It's told in Armenian poetry, Tumanian and others. And then one night they put out the fire, so he's beginning to drown, and not laughing, he's drowning, and then he's calling out for his girl, and her name was Tamar. And in Armenian, you say Tamar. So that became the name of the island. It's a very important historical area for a lot of reasons. Ron?
Yeah, when I went to Armenia a couple of years ago, we were traveling out of Yerevan with one of your fellow students at UCLA, and we saw some buildings there that were supposedly part of the silk trade.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and there was a lot of money to be made for tariffs when people came through and they weighed the product, and we saw scales and things at the museum. How much did that have to influence the development of the region and Armenia and everything?
So that's moving into more modern compared to what I was talking about, but there are in many areas caravanserais, buildings which were used by caravans to overnight. They're hotels, caravanserais, and we know from at least the 9th century that Armenia had international trade. So they were importing and exporting goods through this region. We know all the way up through the 19th, 20th century that this was still part of the Silk Road, that Russia and Britain were fighting over, the Ottoman Empire, because overland, the way to get from Asia to Europe was through this area, and Armenian merchants were among those who were very active in it. Down here would be the Mediterranean, and there's the area of Cilicia, which also had an active area. Marco Polo traveled through there, talks about it. So yeah, there's plenty of evidence. This is from at least there's books on it. It's called Cities of Ancient Armenia, and it's talking about settlements that became cities because of trade, international trade. And when Armenia was kingdoms, those cities thrived. And then when they went to war, it disrupted the trade. So they lost out on it. Okay.
Location.
Yeah, it is location.
Amazing gateway.
Yeah.
What are the, so it's amazing that you have so many sites preserved. Is there a legal structure in terms of site preservation?
There is, but it's changing, and some places are not as well preserved, but there is a conscious attempt by the government, different governments, to try to now really develop these into protected and also places where they can still do research, because a lot of them, the archaeology is stopped and there's more to be done. So for instance, this is only one part of the entire big part over here that still needs to be excavated. So there is some sort of legal framework. I'm not really familiar with all of the details, but there is a historical preservation ministry. So they do preserve these and keep an eye on them, and they've documented them.
This is true in the United States.
Exactly.
Laws, but they're changing.
Yeah. Take a final question and then we'll.
So in terms of archaeology, so you said that now they don't have enough archaeological excavations. Why is it? Is because of the budget? Because of the.
Yes, because in the Soviet times, there was dedicated budget. When the Soviet Union fell apart in 1991, Armenia became an independent republic. And they don't really have, for many years, up until 2008, it was really impacted economically. I mean, there wasn't much money to be had to be able to spend on these kinds of things. Now it's getting better, but you know, the more money you have, the more people you could do it. But and I've been actually to other sites which are actually up here. There are Roman sites, capitals of Armenia, which have been excavated but kind of stopped again. So when money runs out, they stop, and hopefully it can start again. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Georgia, I have students from Georgia and Ukraine as well.
You're part of this. You're the class there. Finally.
We'll get a picture too together with.
Yes, thank you.
We'll get some more pictures there. Good. 9 people, 8 people. Good.